I'm Nima Rajan. The federal government and the provinces have agreed on a new national vaccine passport for domestic and international travel. Several provinces have already rolled out new proof of vaccination. Prime Minister Trudeau says all provinces plan to have their version of the Canadian document available by the end of next month. Rather than distribute a separate federal document for international travel, provinces and territories have agreed to tailor their own vaccine passports. Well, COVID aid for many is set to come to an end this weekend, but Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says there will be a new program to help some of those still in need.
The existing income and business support programs will end on October 23rd, as previously announced. We are moving from the very broad-based support that was appropriate at the height of our lockdowns to more targeted measures that will provide help where it is needed while prudently managing government finances.
Measures like the Canada Recovery Benefit were meant to be a temporary support mechanism during the economic crisis caused by COVID-19. Ms. Freeland says the still hurting tourism and hospitality sectors will be buoyed by new wage and rent subsidies as long as businesses can prove a prolonged and deep revenue loss. Well, meanwhile, researchers at Canada's National Archives say recent service cuts are making their work, which is already hampered by COVID-19, even more challenging. With the archival reading room now closed 4 out of 7 days each week, the Canadian Historical Association issued a letter urging the institution to reconsider its staff reductions. Historians say the move means researchers and students from across the country must scramble for appointments to view documents in the Ottawa reading room. Vancouver's Top Cop is reporting a 700% spike in violent shoplifting across the city. This is compared to pre-pandemic stats for 2019. Chief Adam Palmer says 884 cases have been recorded so far this year, and he expects that number to top 1,000 by January. He says the force has increased foot and bike patrols in an effort to respond faster to calls. Chief Palmer adds that many officers are working a lot of overtime monitoring protests and handling pandemic-related complaints. The Alberta energy regulator has charged Tidewater Midstream and Infrastructure for a release of acidic water in west-central Alberta. The regulator says the release of acidic water into a nearby creek occurred in October 2019. This was at Tidewater's Ram River sour gas processing plant near Rocky Mountain House. Calgary-based Tidewater has been charged with 10 violations under the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. The Canadian Medical Association is again calling on Saskatchewan to bring in tougher public measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Saskatchewan's chief medical health officer released COVID-19 modeling on Wednesday. It shows hospitalizations will continue to increase until December unless restrictions such as reduced gathering sizes are reintroduced. Dr. Catherine Smart, president of the National Association, says the province needs to increase vaccination rates through mandatory vaccination in healthcare settings. She says they also need to bring in a circuit breaker to reduce the spread. Saskatchewan continues to have the highest weekly death rates among the province. New details are due out today on how Ontario plans to move beyond current COVID-19 public health restrictions. In mid-August, the province had planned to move past Step 3 of the reopening framework, but the rising numbers of fourth-wave cases prompted the government to slam on the brakes. Since then, nearly 80% of eligible Ontarians have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. And Premier Doug Ford has hinted the new plan will include how and when to lift more public health measures. 2 Atlantic Canada provinces are launching their digital COVID vaccine passports today. Both Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador will turn to apps using a QR code to confirm residents are fully vaccinated. This allows them to access places like restaurants, bars, bingo halls, and performance spaces. New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs says his province will have a passport system by mid-November. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says a batch of onions is being recalled due to possible salmonella contamination. The raw onions included red, white, and yellow varieties were imported by ProSource Produce LLC of Haley, Idaho, from the Mexican state of Chihuahua. They were sold in Ontario and Quebec and possibly other provinces and territories between July 1st and August 31st. The onions were marketed under a variety of brand names, including Big Bull, Peak Fresh Produce, Sierra Mouter Produce, Marcon First Crop, Marcon Essentials, Rio Blue Pro Source, Rio Valley, and Imperial Fresh. We'll be back after a short break. Everyone, stay tuned. The world is facing an energy crunch, and Europe is feeling it most as natural gas prices skyrocket to 5 times what they were at the start of the year. This is forcing some factories to throttle back production. Gas reserves that were depleted last winter haven't been made up, and chief supplier Russia has held back on supplying extra. Fears are rising that Europe will have to ration electricity if it's a cold winter. Meanwhile, China has seen power outages in some towns, while people worldwide are facing higher utility bills. And this includes Canada. The latest figures on inflation confirm that Canadians are paying higher prices for key goods like gasoline and food. The global economy is using more energy as it rebounds from the coronavirus pandemic, which is straining gas, oil, and other fuel supplies. Well, joining us now to talk more on this is Mr. Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at GasWizard.ca. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Good to be here, Nima.
So what is behind this worldwide energy crunch?
A lot to do with demand exceeding supply, but most importantly, supply itself having been dramatically curbed, not just because of the pandemic, but because of actions taken by financiers well before the pandemic to, as it were, divest from fossil fuels. These are the proverbial chickens now coming home to roost in the form of a shortage in supply, an energy crunch, energy supply, and if you will, we're looking now at a scenario of energy poverty.
Now, it's interesting that multiple countries are facing this strain in energy resources. How are we all connected, Mr. McTeague?
Well, if you look at coal, an alternative to coal is natural gas. If you can use that to generate whatever widgets you want to produce, or you can use oil, or you use both. So if one particular product is in short supply, it means another would compensate. But in order to attract that compensation, prices have to go up. In the case of Canada, which has the third largest provable reserves in the world of many of these, now very precious resources, we've been hemmed in. We don't build pipelines in this country. As Alberta pointed out yesterday, we're subject to a lot of foreign funding that's gone into hog tie. And as a result, consumers are now going to pay the price, not just globally, but here in Canada, where now we're experiencing the highest gas prices we've ever paid on average, period.
Now, that's interesting, sir. Canada is regarded as a world energy leader. So what is the reason behind this rise in Canadian gas prices in particular?
Well, governments have helped themselves to ever-increasing taxes. And of course, because we're not selling our number one commodity, oil and gas, to the rest of the world, especially the United States, which, by the way, desperately needs it. They're down 1 million barrels in production from where they were pre-pandemic. We're now looking at a scenario where the Canadian dollar is not responding. It's no longer the petrodollar, because all of our goods are priced in US dollars, whether they're made here or not. A weaker Canadian dollar is actually resulting very much in a pay cut for Canadians. Gasoline alone, probably an extra 9-10 cents a liter, and then the carbon taxes. Those ever increasing, creeping carbon taxes are really starting to take a bite out of every consumer's pocket.
So what is the current state of energy supply within Canada overall, within this energy crunch, sir?
Well, we do have adequate supply. The problem is we can't get it to market. And unfortunately, because the only means in which we can get it to markets like the United States is by rail or by other inefficient means, it means there's an added cost and it becomes less attractive. So less investment in the Canadian oil and gas sector is now starting to cascade into other areas of the economy where we're starting to see higher prices, making Canada less of an attractive place to compete and to do business. And more importantly, hurting consumers, destroying their purchasing power, so that in essence, not only do we have the potential for slowing growth, we're now seeing something that we haven't seen in a long time, inflation rearing its ugly head. And I like the Bank of Canada's original thought and other experts. Inflation is now exceeding most people's expectation, and we're now in a period of very long-term inflation, which is going to continue to sap consumers from coast to coast.
All right, sir, just about a minute left, but you are from GasWizard.ca, which is known for its fuel price predictions. So what are your current fuel price predictions for this week?
So we're looking at an average of about 3 cents a litre increase right across the country. Perhaps the only exception might be Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba, and parts of the BC interior. They'll probably remain where they are in the 142, 143 range for the prairies, central BC, about 55. Vancouver should look at about a 3 cent increase. Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes, 3 cents, and that will again break all-time new records for places that haven't seen $1.50 for a liter of gasoline. Get ready, because that isn't just the new normal. We're going to be pushing towards perhaps another, in this week alone, another 3 cents a liter added to that.
All right. Well, I'm sure our viewers are not looking forward to that. Mr. Teague, thank you so much for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Good to be here. Thanks, Nima.
All right, we'll be back after the break with a look at crypto. Catherine Murray of the Buck Stops here will be taking a look at ongoing developments in the cryptocurrency market. And then, of course, more news from around the world only on Forum Daily News. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. All right, welcome back. Up next, we have a cryptocurrency and digital asset update with Catherine Murray, the host of the Buck Stops here. Take it away, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima, and hello and welcome to your weekly crypto and digital asset update. I'm Catherine Murray. Full disclosure, I am an investor in digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, etc. After having looked at it, researched it, and having many sophisticated investment conversations, probably for the past 5 or 6 years. Took me a while to get in, but I have been looking at this asset class as it's grown to become an asset class for probably, again, 5 to 6 years. By way of background, I'm a fundamental equity analyst, junior analyst I was on Wall Street, and then on the sales side, institutional equity sales and trading. So I really come at it from that eye and angle. But I also, of course, remember going back to the .com era when we had Amazon and competing with BarnesandNoble.com and Borders.com. Remember, it was a bookstore to begin with. So I think it's always important to take a look at new asset classes with the potential of one. But do your own homework, get your own financial advice. Please, please, please do that. Having said that, let's get to the news of this week with respect to Bitcoin. And it was a big week for Bitcoin. It rallied above a previous record high, closing above 66,000, pushing the overall value of cryptocurrency to $2.7 trillion. Many are attributing this move to the launch of a Bitcoin futures-based ETF. BITO is the ticker there, which apparently held $1.1 billion after its first day of trading. Now, why is this important in terms of why would this launch of a new product cause Bitcoin to rally to such a degree? A lot of the time when you're able to create financial products, that is basically an indication that there is more buy-in, more enthusiasm, and also almost a maturation of an asset class. So that is one of the reasons why it really rallied. We've also been hearing from some very famous investors this week as well, which I want to share with you, bullish comments on Bitcoin. Paul Tudor Jones also helped to boost the sentiment, saying that there clearly is a place for crypto. We've also heard from one of the largest bond investors in the world, that of course is PIMCO, the CIO there, saying that the firm is considering trading crypto in one of their strategies. We've also heard from PayPal founder Peter Thiel saying at an event in Miami this week that he feels underinvested. So certainly quite a bit of a positive commentary from, again, very sophisticated investors. Again, do your own homework. We also know that there's another side of the story, the more bearish side, which is from a regulatory perspective. We've heard from people in DC, Senator Elizabeth Warren, for one, warning in July that crypto puts the financial system at the whim of some shadowy faceless group of super coders. We've also had some concerns from Janet Yellen, former Fed chair, voicing her concerns. So that is important to note. But in terms of who is invested, as I mentioned, some sophisticated investors continuing to talk positively about it. An interesting stat I came across this week, roughly 46 million Americans own some form of digital currencies. Also in the news this week as well, Coinbase has announced that it will service Facebook's digital currency wallet custody partner. That's a mouthful, but just something to note. This is a pilot project that Facebook has been talking about, and there has been regulatory pushback. And also in the news this week in Canada, The Canadian investment firm Wealthsimple is going to be offering their retirement clients the option to allocate 1 to 5% of their assets in an ETF, a Bitcoin ETF. So important there as well. Lastly, I would just note as we continue to keep our eyes on Bitcoin as well as other coins and also Ethereum. Ether just touched 43.60 US dollars. So also hitting a previous record high there. A lot going on in the crypto world, which I hope to bring you more of on a weekly basis. That does it for me. Nima, back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Catherine. That was your cryptocurrency and digital asset update with Catherine Murray. For more on crypto, the markets, financial analysis, and news, tune into Catherine Murray's show, The Buck Stops Here on the News Forum Network. All right, organizers of a bid to unionize Amazon workers at a distribution center in New York City are preparing to deliver hundreds of signatures to the National Labor Relations Board. It would be an important milestone in efforts to form a collective bargaining unit for employees of the online retail giant. Organizers say they now have more than 2,000 people who have signed on. The bid in New York City is the second attempt in the past year to form a union at Amazon. Workers at a warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, previously voted to reject a union. All right, stay tuned. More news from around the world coming up shortly after this break. The head of Greenpeace is warning against efforts by countries and corporations to greenwash their ongoing pollution of the planet. Jennifer Morgan, the executive director of Greenpeace International, says the forthcoming UN climate talks in Glasgow will likely feature a flurry of new commitments from governments and businesses to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. But climate campaigners say behind-the-scenes lobbying before the talks could hamper efforts to achieve an ambitious deal. The White House and Democrats are rushing to rework key aspects of President Joe Biden's $2 trillion domestic policy plan. The ideas include shelving a proposed big increase in corporate tax rates while adding a new tax on the investment gains of the very richest Americans. Mr. Biden acknowledges he still faces challenges in connecting different factions of the Democratic Party to agree on the final content of the bill. France is forging ahead with a nationwide vaccination and booster shot program against both the flu and COVID-19. This comes amid fears the two sicknesses may come together in the winter. France's annual flu vaccination campaign kicked off Friday, 4 days earlier than initially planned. Its launch dovetails with France's COVID-19 vaccination program. French health authorities say the shots can be given the same day with one in each arm. European Union leaders are discussing the sensitive topic of migration to the bloc and how to stop the influx of refugees arriving from neighboring Belarus. EU members Poland and Lithuania have been struggling to cope with an unusually high number of migrants arriving at their borders with Belarus in recent months. The EU is accusing President Alexander Lukashenko's regime of using migrants to destabilize the EU in retaliation for sanctions. The leaders of Russia and Israel have met for the first time, hailing friendly ties between the two countries. Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett for bilateral talks. Mr. Putin hailed Russian-Israeli ties as unique, saying that their dialogue and relations rely on a very deep connection between their people. Mr. Bennett praised the contribution of Israel's 1 million Russian speakers, emphasizing the deep connection between the two countries. China is saying there is no room for compromise or concessions over the issue of Taiwan. This follows comments by U.S. President Joe Biden saying the U.S. is committed to defending the island if attacked. A foreign ministry spokesperson reasserted China's long-standing claim that the island is its territory. The spokesperson says China's strong determination to defend its national sovereignty and territorial integrity should not be underestimated. Ethiopia's government says it has again carried out airstrikes in Mekelle, the capital of the Tigray region. It is the fourth time this week as a nearly year-long war intensifies. A government spokesperson told the Associated Press that the strike targeted a former military training center that is now serving as a battle network hub for Tigray forces. Residents confirmed the strikes, and there was no immediate information on any casualties. The UN Special Envoy for Myanmar is warning that February's military takeover has led to armed conflict. She says if power isn't returned to the people in a democratic way, the country will go into the direction of a failed state. Christine Schraner-Bergener told UN reporters on Thursday that the conflict between the military and civilians and ethnic minorities is intensifying. She noted that the military uses a range of tactics against civilian populations. This includes burning villages, looting properties, mass arrests, torture and execution of prisoners, gender-based violence, and random artillery fire into residential areas. United States federal prosecutors have unveiled criminal charges against an alleged corruption ring. 5 individuals are accused of paying millions of dollars in bribes to a top ally of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. This to profit from lucrative contracts to import food and medicine amid a time of hardship in Venezuela. The so-called CLAP program was set up by Mr. Maduro to provide basic food staples to poor Venezuelans. The long search for the man suspected of killing his girlfriend in Wyoming is over. The FBI has identified human remains found in a Florida nature preserve as those of Brian Laundrie. He was a person of interest in the death of Gabby Petito while the couple was on a cross-country road trip last month. His remains, a backpack and a notebook were discovered. Ms. Petito's body was found days after her disappearance, and it was determined that she was strangled. Well, there is confirmation that Vikings settled in a remote corner of northern Newfoundland by 1021 AD. The groundbreaking study establishes, for the first time, a precise date for the earliest European habitation in the Americas, exactly 1,000 years ago. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily News. Take care, Canada. We'll see you again next time.